Bruce DuMont back with hour number 2 of Beyond the Beltway. This afternoon, I was going through the internet, and I ran across a great video, and it was produced by the Surgeon General of the United States. And in the wake of all this discussion about wearing a mask, not the medical kind, but suggesting that you get some cloth and you cover your mouth when you go out of your house, if you have to go out of your house. And it's a very succinct video, runs just a little over a minute. And this is what my mask looks like now. And you can see that it's somewhat fashion forward because it matches my hat. But let me just show you how simple it was. It starts with a piece of cloth, a square piece of cloth like this. This actually is a napkin, so if you wanted to have one for each day of the week or one that matches your hat or your outfit, you could do it. But all you really need, it's a folding concept, and it's this and some rubber bands, some long rubber bands. And again, if you go to the website and you look up the Surgeon General of the United States, he will tell you how to make these masks. It took me about 45 seconds to make it. I'm gonna make a couple more. I wanted to be in red today because our background here at the station is red. So again, this is what you could do. Go through some napkins. You'll probably have some napkins, but you could do it with an old, T-shirt or whatever your favorite team is, and you can make a very unique mask. So anyway, just a little advice, something you can do. We're talking about the future of jobs in America, and Andrew Christian, he's a job expert, and Paul Vallis from our previous segment also joins us, the former head of the Chicago Public School System and a national education expert. And I want to go back to you, Andrew, and just to clarify, because I asked before the break whether you think that there will be some people out there trying to game the system and decide whether or not it's better to get unemployment or stay on the job with their employer. What would your advice be? Is this something nobody should try to game this system at this moment?
Yeah, I certainly don't think people should try to game the system. Inevitably, there may be a handful of people do, but look, this is a very deep crisis, and the way to address it right now is to not be very picky with how we're sending people money. They're going with a tactic of carpet bombing the country with an infusion of cash at a time when it's unbelievably necessary, and it seems to be the right approach to get us through at least the next month.
And also, we should mention that if you are expecting a refund from the government and you are in their system for direct deposits, you are going to get your money first, and it's going to be on an ascending order. In other words, if you're a taxpayer who doesn't pay much in taxes, you're going to be in the first wave of checks that go out. And if you're a high earner, you'll still, as long as you're under $99,000, you're going to get your check, but it's going to be it's going to be a few weeks away, not necessarily in the next couple of weeks. And also, we should mention that if you're not into the federal system, or you're not into the automatic deposit, direct deposit, you could wait, according to published reports, you could wait several months because they've got to cut a specific check and send it out to you. So that's something else you and your tax people should be figuring out, and not inundate the government phone lines and email by asking some pretty basic questions that can easily be found out there. Paul Vallis, I want to go back to you for just a moment and bring you into our conversation with Andrew, because again, we talked about what teachers are doing. Is this a growth time to be a teacher, or because of all the things that you talked about in hour number 1, is this sort of a scary time to be a teacher, because there may be dramatic changes coming forward that maybe a teacher is not interested in learning a new way to do their job?
Well, clearly, I think what you're going to see post-pandemic, because this won't be the last pandemic we have, and I think the country will always be prepared to react aggressively based on the past experience. And there's going to be a political price to pay for this. How it evens out, there's going to be political consequences. But at the end of the day, I think it's a growth period. And I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of states expanding their teacher certification requirements to ensure that the teachers have the ability to deliver curriculum instruction online. Look, it's the wave of the future. I mentioned that with the federal government about to invest $13 billion in education, which in effect raises Title I spending for school districts 80%. And most districts have stable revenues because they're getting stable property tax revenues, and the state can't reduce their funding or they don't get the federal funding in return. There's going to be an opportunity here to build the type of remote learning infrastructure that will not only allow you to deal with these emergencies, and God knows I've been through a lot of them, but it will also give schools the capacity to offer extended day instruction, extended year instruction. It'll give teachers the capacity to get into the homes, to connect more effectively with parents. So I believe that that states are going to move to require that teachers who do become certified, conditional for certification, will require a certain mastery of that.
Andrew, as you look at the people who are out of work now, what career advice would you give to them? Obviously, they're worried right now about getting the unemployment check that's going to keep them going for hopefully a couple of months, but maybe not. I mean, there may be another stimulus package that's down the road. At least the president has hinted at that. But what advice would you be giving to those people that are out of work and maybe they're between 35 and 50 years old?
Yeah,
I want to get Andrew's response to this.
Yeah,
and then we'll come back to you. Go ahead, Andrew.
Sorry.
Yeah, in some ways, the most important work that job seekers do hasn't changed, and that's networking with people that can help you navigate your way into new positions. The way you do that has changed dramatically. You're not going to conferences. You're not handing out business cards or taking people to coffee. But there's a lot of people at home right now that have extra time on their hands, that may be feeling more generous with their time. And if you're an unemployed person, it's a great time to reach out to former coworkers, people you know at companies that you'd like to work for, and ask for a little bit of their time to talk about their organization, what it's like to work there, and how at the end of this crisis they may be able to apply for positions. It's a great time to do that type of networking.
Or also to follow Paul Vallis' suggestion that maybe teaching is in your future. Paul, I didn't mean to cut you off, but go ahead.
No, that's quite all right. In fact, I'm glad Andy picked it up. Look, I mean, you're going to have to develop the capacity to work online. It's going to impact so many industries, and so people need to brush off those credentials. Look, I do most of my work now online from a distance, so I've seen very little interruption in the type of work that I'm doing. In fact, I'm probably saving 2 hours a day in not only commuting time, but also just in transportation costs and in parking and things like that. So clearly, the economy is going to be changed permanently, and I think obviously the capacity you're going to see the emergence of more occupations, more job opportunities.
We've got to go. Paul Vallis, thank you very much for joining us, and also Andrew Challenger from Challenger, Gray, and Christmas. I'm Bruce DuMont. We will continue with new guests in a moment.
This message is from the National Council on Aging.
Bruce DuMont back in Chicago or in Evanston. Nice to have you with us this evening. 1-800-723-8289 is the phone number, and we are now joined by three new guests who are going to join us. First of all, Roberto Montano, who is a Democrat. He joins us from Chicago. Charles Lipson from the University of Chicago also joins us. And a Republican joining us is Kenton McCarthy, and he joins us from Arizona, although he looks like he's popped off the line here for a moment, but hopefully he'll be back. Roberto Montano, let me bring you into the conversation because you're a commercial real estate guy.
That's right, yeah.
Can you think of a worse profession to be in right now?
Oh, I am honored to be in commercial real estate. There's so many people right now that need our help. that my phone has not stopped ringing.
Commercial. Let me just stop you for a moment. If people are going, if businesses are going out of business, why is it they're learning to run their businesses maybe with fewer people? Why is your business so great?
Businesses are transforming how they do business. There's a great carnitas restaurant posted on 18th Street, and they had a line socially distanced down the street, and business continues. So now what they've done is they become more social media savvy. They're hiring marketing people, and they're investing to grow market share. Right now, people are picking up the phone and building mind share so they can get market share. This came to pass. It didn't come to stay. And those folks that had the reserves are going to be in business in 60, 90, 120 days.
Charles Lipson from the University of Chicago. Charles, when you talk about society and how it's changing or how your life is changing, is the idea of going out to dinner with friends on a Saturday night at a nice restaurant, is that a social experience that might not return in any large degree?
I think it will return. I sure hope it does. I mean, it's a wonderful way that we get together. Now, I also think that we'll be using a lot more media like we're doing right now. And we'll find that some of the uses don't work out very well. I really enjoyed the conversation in the last hour, Bruce, about education. And I think that it's going to be harder probably in the younger grades to do a lot of that. And in the older grades, you'll have a lot more content. And I hope that some of the content that's being done now will be recorded so the rest of us can take advantage of it later. So I think there's going to be a lot of transformations, and I think it's going to be really hard to predict what it is. I was really struck by what Roberto just said. It completely surprised me that his phone would be ringing because people need commercial space.
Yeah, that surprises me. Kenton McCarthy, you join us from Arizona. Nice to see you again this evening. You were a guest with a phone caller last week, and we'll get to your point in just a moment. But generally speaking, when you look at the things that have changed, what are the changes in society that you think are going to become a way of life if and when this pandemic is over in the not too distant future?
Gosh, if I only knew. Here's my biggest concern. I manage money for cities, so I'm essentially a risk manager. But the way society today is constructed is just a variety of complex systems that kind of interact, overlap, but feed on each other. What we've done is we've asked a certain section of complex systems to be shut down and yet have no impact on the other. My biggest concern is an economic collapse is typically followed by a sociological collapse. And when that social contract frays, then things start to unspool quickly, dramatically, and they're really hard to tether in.
How does it break? Tell me what you mean by breaking down the social compact.
Social contract?
Yeah.
Well, that's what keeps us acting as normal citizens. We can be collectivists to a certain point. We can say, we're doing the right thing. This is for the good of society. And at some point, we're going to say, you know what? I got to make changes for myself. When you have vast swaths of unemployed, lower class, unskilled people put out of work, telling them it's illegal to go to their job, at some point, they have to feed themselves. They have to feed their kids. So for them to act as collectivists and say, oh, I'm doing it for the better good, or I'm just going to work for home, that's a stretch.
Do we see, and I want to start with you, Charles, do we see or do you fear a separation between the blue-collar workers that Kenton was just talking about and the white-collar community?
What he's raising is a very interesting point. I do think that there could be a separation. I think a lot of this depends on how long it lasts. The first relief bills are designed to go for what, a couple of months or something like
Right.
that. I think if you have to go much beyond that, it's not just a question of financing. It's just a question of it's very hard to keep people in their houses for that long and so forth. I think what's likely to happen is that there will also be a separation by age, so that younger people will begin to go out and be allowed to go out, and it's proper for them to go out, and older people who are more vulnerable or will be asked to stay home.
Roberto, we live in a city that is, we're supposed to all be staying home, okay? And most of us are staying home unless they go out once a week to do a radio show, or they go to a drive-in restaurant to get dinner once in a while. Are you surprised at the ease with which this monumental government dictate, at least in Chicago and the state of Illinois and many other states around the country, how relatively easy it has evolved with few at least outbreaks of insurrection?
You know, Bruce, in Chicago, we've had a couple of tragedies. We had our first police officer pass away.
Right.
And I think that's pretty sobering. You know, here are our protectors. Now, he was a narcotics officer, undercover, not a lot of contact with the public, but one of our Chicago's, finest. And those things just sober you up, and you do your part. And I think that fundamentally, Democrat, Republican, whatever, we're all patriots. I think we all love our country.
But Roberto, that's great, and I would hope that everybody would do it. But if we drove through the Pilsen neighborhood or Little Village, which are Hispanic neighborhoods in Chicago, would we see many people on the street? Would they be sitting on their porches? Would they be in their houses? And again, as the weather gets better, and this thing is no longer something that was just dictated by the mayor, is this something that are people going to start rebelling against this? And I don't care whether they're in Chicago; they could be listening in Los Angeles or 40 other states around the country.
A lot of us went to church today virtually for the first time. St. Procopius, where I was baptized on 18th Street. I got to see my friends online. It's kind of a strange thing, but these are the sacrifices. We're in Lent, and talk about Little Village, talk about Pilsen. A lot of us happen to be Catholic, and Catholicism, in my opinion, is about love and serving one another. We have to do what we have to do for the greater good. Now, in Pilsen, specifically where I live across from Harrison Park. On Wednesday, for the first time ever, I saw police officers in the park. Now, nobody is congregating. I mean, the lake is different.
Mm-hmm.
In the neighborhoods, nobody's congregating, but people do go for a walk. They go for a run. You're allowed to go out for fresh air. But my personal feeling is that businesses that are in the restaurants, for example, they're going to have a tough time right now.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of folks are adjusting.
I want to go back to Kenton. Kenton, it's been suggested by Dr. Fauci that this virus may come back again. It may come back in the fall.
It's about time. Let me tell you one.
Or it may come back next year.
Exactly.
What happens if it comes
Bruce,
back
wait,
again?
Do you know how long the Justinian virus lasted that took out the Byzantine Empire?
No.
225 years.
Okay.
Now they didn't have scientists like we do, and they didn't have central bankers running scared like we do today. So this idea, here's my biggest fear is we're going to go in lockdown, and we're going to put millions out of business forever. We're going to fundamentally alter the business landscape and the social landscape, and all of a sudden in June or July or August, we're going to say, "Oh, we got to do it again." You can't do this again. This is national suicide. I mean, I tweeted to you this afternoon. I think short term, Anthony Fauci is the biggest threat to what remains of our society, our economy, and our democracy.
Elaborate.
If he's given the privilege or the honor or the dictate to say how long and to what degree he's going to shut down our economy, that's going to ruin everything. The economy is the sinews that keep everything bound together, and they're fed with money going to and fro. So you're interrupting that. You're going to have these complex systems start to break down. You can't put those back together in August.
Okay, that's a very combustible statement. I wouldn't expect anything less from you. But again, it also makes us all think. And when we come back, I'm going to start with you, Charles. When we come back, I want you to sort of follow up on Kenton's comments, and that is the power at the moment, the power of the microphone by Dr. Anthony Fauci. He has the ear of the president, at least as of the moment. And I want to get your reaction and everybody else's reaction. 1-800-723-8289. I'm Bruce DuMont. Bruce DuMont back in Evanston, Illinois. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. 1-800-723-8289. For those of you who are either obviously listening on radio stations around the country or watching us on our Facebook Live post, we're not live on YouTube at the moment. That because of our new configuration, that is on a delay basis. But again, you can see this show on YouTube later on the night. But again, if you're listening on Facebook Live, you are watching us at Beyond the Beltway with Bruce DuMont. That's our Facebook Live page. But again, if you are a regular listener or if you are a regular participant on this program, you have been a guest on this program, I encourage you to go to Beyond the Beltway Fans. Look up Beyond the Beltway Fans. It is a separate Facebook page. And you can join us. I mean, ask to join, and I will accept everybody, because that is about continuing a relationship with people that you've heard and seen on this program. And not only will you continue to see and hear them on this program, but also periodically they're very active on Facebook. They write very great essays. Kenton McCarthy is one. Charles Lipsome is prodigious in what he has to write. And this is another opportunity to stay in touch with the people that you hear and see on this program. And they publish their stuff at the Beyond the Beltway fan page. So if you've not done that, I would expect hopefully lots of people are going to do that after the broadcast this evening. And again, whether it's radio or television, this is an opportunity for us. And again, in this time when we have to find new ways to communicate, I'd also be very interested in knowing how you're reacting to sort of the evolution of this program. And for 39 and a half years, we had 4 people sitting around a table and having a wonderful conversation. And again, we lost the ability to do that when the Museum of Broadcast Communication was shut down over a COVID virus. So now we're doing it from a radio station. But there's nobody else here, no other guests with me here at the radio station, but they're guests that you know. We have them from around the country as well as from around Chicago. And again, Kenton McCarthy is from Arizona, joins us tonight, and we had guests last week who joined us from California. So again, we're changing. I'd love to get your assessment as to whether you think this new format is working or not. I can't say there's not too much I can do to change it, but again, it would be good to hear whether you feel whether the new format is actually fewer guests and we change them more often. I'd like to know how you are reacting to that. Let's go back to Charles Lipsome. I asked a question before the break, and that is, what if this becomes a cycle for us in America? Kenton basically said he doesn't think there's a way we can survive that with the dictates that are coming out of Andy Fauci and the ability of the president at least to agree with him on many scientific points. Your reaction, Charles?
Between two kinds of bounce back. One would be if we, let's say, started letting people out next week and then had a second wave that came through. And that's essentially what seems to be happening in China. Another would be if we let people out in a prudent way, but it comes back in a seasonal way like the flu. And I think that the good news there is that there are a number of treatments that look very promising. And then beyond that, there are some vaccines, and not just one vaccine. There are a whole number of candidate vaccines that are going to be tested. But I just saw today yet another treatment that's already on the market. This one for parasites has been found in Australia to be very effective in the test tube. Since it's already out there, they can almost immediately begin testing it for safety and effectiveness on humans. I would say one more thing about the bureaucracies, Anthony Fauci and so forth. It's a common feature in all these bureaucracies that they are focused on one thing. So the health bureaucracy is focused on health, and the economic bureaucracies are focused on that. And what I've been impressed by, actually, in the Trump administration is pushing the health bureaucracies to move quickly, because they don't normally want to do that. They want to button it down and have everything nailed down, and it requires that. But the big decision that is coming is the economic reopening and how they're going to do that. And
I want to follow up on that, but I want to go to Roberto to get his response to what you've just said and also what Kenton said, and that is, do you agree that the health bureaucracy, which everyone is hailing right now, these are the New York City firefighters and police officers, and everybody wants to hail them because of the tremendous job that they are doing. But again, at some point, if the patient lives but the hospital closes, I mean, are you worried about that, Roberto?
I have good news for everybody, which is that there is a study that came out on the 26th of March, just about last Thursday, at MIT, and it studied specifically this question. And what they deduced, these are MIT people, neither, they're academics, I guess, but they're neither economists. Well, they are economists, but they're looking at both sides, balancing both. What it said is that stronger pandemic responses yield better economic recoveries based off of the 1918 flu pandemic data that they had. And so there's just, here's the quote, "We find no evidence that cities that acted more aggressively in public health terms performed worse in economic terms." This is assistant professor at MIT Sloan School of Management. So it's not like the public health school. This is the business school.
Now, in this particular case, one of the things is that obviously what has emerged here is you've had the federal government as represented by the president. You've had governors that have popped up, some more critical of the federal administration than others. Certainly our governor here in Illinois has been the poster child for that in recent weeks. But my question is, so we're dealing between those that believe in states' rights or what's happening at the state level, and the news media, which has an opportunity to take a side here. They're taking the side of the governors, because they will give the federal government, and Trump will get no credence at all. Whether it's Trump suggesting that hydrochloroquine, might work. I mean, they banged him on that. They're not going to give him an inch in their coverage of this story. So my question to you is, and I'm going to ask Kenton, we do have 9 governors at this moment, unless they've changed before we went on the air. We have 9 governors that have not shut down their states. They're all Republicans. Most of them are grouped, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Iowa, and those. I'm going to come back to you, but I want to get Kenton's response here. Is the next several months or several even weeks, because again, what lies ahead, according to the federal government and Dr. Fauci, is, all hell is going to break loose in the next couple of weeks. Well, are we setting up a situation where we're going to look at the results of who dies in those 9 states and say, you know what, those governors were right?
If you ignore my tweets like almost everyone else does, including myself, you'll notice that I said a pandemic is much too serious a matter to be entrusted to doctors, because they look through a universal lens, a morally noble lens but they don't see the collateral damage or the externalities. Also, the first casualty in a pandemic is context. So we're trying to force feed a universal decision or strategy with no previous history, no owner's manual, and think it's going to work out. And yet we do. Federalism does allow governors to make certain calls in their own state. We've had a food fight here in Arizona the last 2 weeks like you would not believe.
And you like that. I mean, you're a federalist.
I have no problem with Doug Ducey laying out his side, and then I have no problem with Senator Sinema bleeding 20 hours a day on Twitter that he's doing it wrong and she's saving lives, therefore he isn't. We've got a binary argument: is you either follow along with this draconian response because we're saving lives, or you're killing people. Those are the only two options allowed today. I don't buy that.
Okay, but Charles, back to you. When we look at 3 months from now, if we're all here and we come back again, 3 months from now, are we going to be saying to these 9 governors, are we going to be saying, you guys called it right, you didn't shut your states down, you may have had some deaths, but they were not catastrophic level like New York, and that you guys, you gutted it out, and your decision was the right decision for your state. May not be the right decision for the rest of the country, but it was the right state for your state. It was the right decision for your state. Are we going to be there?
I think that Trump has done the right thing in not trying to federalize everything and do a one size fits all. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the 55 mile an hour speed limit was imposed across the country, and people out in Montana and Wyoming just thought it was ludicrous,
right?
Because it was. Now, the governors that haven't shut their states down, they'll have to bear responsibility for that. Right. But I'll wager this: if there's a hot spot that breaks out in Pierre, in the Dakotas, or Bismarck or something, they'll immediately act. I don't doubt that they'll do that. But I think that the media point that you made is absolutely right. I mean, Trump will either make an error as far as the mainstream media goes by opening up too soon or opening up too late. He'll not be able to get it right as far as they're concerned. I think that that's just sort of baked into the cake, and we just need to move on from it.
When we come back, we're going to hear from Roberta Montagna with the rest of our panel, and we'll also hear from phone calls. We got a lot of them on the line. We'll bring them into the conversation when we come back. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks for joining us tonight on Beyond the Beltway. Back on Beyond the Beltway. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Let's go to Matthew, who's listening to us in San Jose, California. Go ahead, Matthew.
Bruce, I want to mention in California the social distancing may seem to be working. Okay. I'm staying at home. But one thing I do want to applaud is Gavin Newsom showing leadership, showing what we need to do, having directives. There's that one voice. Here's what issue I want to bring up. We all remember Katrina. We all remember Russell Honore. You know, we saw that film. You know, he comes into a square in the streets, his weapons down, takes the entire situation under control. We need one voice. And I agree with Kevin. You know, there is an economic impact. We all know that. It's horrible. But there has to be one voice. The challenge, we have too many voices, and everyone's got an opinion, and there is no playbook for this. And
again, for those, for those listening around the country or watching around the country, the singular voice that we see is we see Gavin Newsom, and we see in New York, we see Andrew Cuomo. We rarely, at least on the Cuomo press conferences, and I've given him good grades, he never lets the doctors talk. I mean, everybody is talking. He's the only one that's talking. And again, he's a great communicator. But in the case of the federal government, you not only have Dr. Birx, but you also have, well, we're going to drop that off. Matthew, is that you or somebody else? Anyway, we have we have more than one voice. Let me go back to you, Kenton, because you obviously said that you don't think that Dr. Fauci at this moment he's got too much power. Is that overstating what you said? I can't hear you right now. Go ahead.
We've walked into the cult of Fauci.
Okay.
That to me gets dangerous when one person who has one viewpoint of it and a health viewpoint, I get that. But that's got to be incorporated into greater models that say, what about the social? What about infrastructures that we're damaging? What about the economy that pays for all this health care? Are we going to devastate all those just as, Daniel Henninger wrote a good piece yesterday calling the Dr. Strangelove virus. Now, again, if you ignore my tweets, you'll see that 3 or 4 weeks ago, I said we're going to approach a Buck Turgidson moment where, if you recall from Strangelove, he said, here are your two options. Neither of them are glamorous. You got X million killed or you got Y million killed. You choose. The virus doesn't care about interest rates. It doesn't care about Andrew Cuomo. It doesn't care about Trump or Fauci.
Right.
It's going to do what it does. We may get to a point where we have to make the ugly decision of, do we keep an economy and thus a nation intact and have X thousands dead, or do we continue down this path, ruin the economy, which results in greater deaths in the future? That's a tough call.
Well, it's also, we're talking about, obviously, an election year. Regardless, Trump thinks about things for re-election, but so do the Democrats.
I think this transcends elections. I really do.
Politicians, nothing transcends elections.
Roberto?
But I'll tell you this.
No, let me go to Roberto first, and then back to Charles. Go ahead, Roberto.
Well, on the election point, I want to highlight leadership and give credit where credit is due. On St. Patty's Day, on the 17th, Illinois had an election. Ohio did not. Now, Governor Mike DeWine, a Republican, has been a great leader on this.
Yes, he has.
And his state is ranked 27th out of 50 right now. And that's for a reason. He's doing all the right things here. Mm-hmm. Now, partisanship is kind of like passé, I think, hopefully. We're going to have an election in November. Part of the quote-unquote pork that we kept hearing about was where Democrats kept saying we ought to allow more people to vote by mail. Now, if we allow people to vote by mail, some people predict that might not go well for one party or the other, but allowing them to proceed in November is critical. Now, thank goodness, thank science, thank whatever you want to thank, Fauci or Trump, it seems that we have now hit less than 600 new cases in New York as of yesterday, which is just a 36-point drop. And I hate to say points, but it seems to have plateaued in New York. It was horrible. It was the epicenter, but things are working. This is, like I said earlier, it came to pass.
Things are working, but again, everyone has said that we're going to be able to define that better in a couple of weeks. Everyone thinks that mid-April, all hell is going to break loose. I mean, with literally a vast number of deaths around the country. But again, by the way, next week or sometime in the next couple of weeks, we'll do a whole segment on the issue of how people should be voting. But you're right. I mean, some governors made early decisions. And again, as you say, Ohio is 27th. Another issue that broke in Ohio, but it was not the exclusive state, and it's a federal matter, is the ticking time bomb that now has been revealed in prisons, county prisons, state prisons, and even in federal prisons where people
and aircraft carriers.
And aircraft carriers, and that's another whole issue. Is we didn't get into that, but obviously that's another big issue that everybody could respond. Let me get just a quick answer. In your opinion, did the Secretary of Army, did he make the right decision in firing the commander of that ship? Yes or no, Kenton?
Yes.
He did. Roberto, what do you think? Did he make the right decision or not by firing the commander?
I'll side with all of his sailors that gave him a standing ovation, applause, and the answer is no.
So you go with the employees. Charles
He already
Lipson,
came up.
go to
He
you.
already tested positive, by the way.
We always go back to you. Go ahead. Charles Lipson, final word to you. Was that the right decision or wrong decision?
I think it was the right decision. He went outside the chain of command and leaked and made it possible to leak the information.
On that note, we want to thank Roberto Montano, Kenton McCarthy, and Charles Lipson. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks to Andrew Marshall. We'll see you next week. Until then, Bruce DuMont, good night from Evanston, Illinois.